Hey everyone, A. Roberts here. It's no secret that I'm a killer main, but this gives me a unique perspective on the survivor side, as I get to see survivors make a lot of mistakes. Sometimes you can best learn about your own weaknesses from your enemy. So to help you be a better survivor, I thought I'd put together this guide covering mistakes that I watch survivors make all the time, even experienced ones, so that you can avoid making them yourself and survive longer out there in the fog. Before we dive in, real quick, if you haven't already subscribed, would you please consider doing so? We are getting really close to that 500 subscriber milestone, and it'd be really great to hit that so that we can unlock the community tab and have more ways to communicate with you all. With that out of the way, let's get into it. Mistake number 1, unhooking too early. I'm sure a number of survivors have shouted at their TVs, accusing me of camping the hook, when in reality, they or their teammate just didn't wait for me to properly leave the area before attempting the rescue. In most cases, I go out of my way not to camp the hook. But if I can't even make it up the basement stairs before the survivor I just hooked down there is rescued, you can't expect me just to ignore that and go wander around trying to find one of your other teammates. Remember, each hook stay takes approximately 60 seconds, as long as the hooked survivor doesn't attempt an escape or miss any skill checks. And 60 seconds is a pretty significant amount of time in this game. As tempting as it can be to make a quick save the second the killer leaves the area, try to be patient. Let the killer get far enough away and interested in something else before making the rescue so that the killer will at least have to make a choice at that point. In the case that the killer is indeed proxy camping, that is, remaining in the general area of the hook waiting for someone to attempt a rescue, then everything I've just said doesn't really apply. But if you are saving people from the hook before the killer can physically leave the area, that's on you when they turn right back around to try to capitalize on your bad play, and doesn't mean they are camping. So in general, be patient and wait to see if the killer will leave the area and get distracted by something else before attempting a hook rescue. Mistake number 2, unhooking while in chase. Granted, there are times where this is absolutely necessary, but that's usually because you or your teammates have already made some mistakes, and now you're forced into a bad play because it's your only option. Under most circumstances, however, going for the unhook while you are in chase is a bad idea and a juicy opportunity for the killer. Best case, the killer will focus on you and allow the person you've just put into a very bad position to leave the area. Worst case, you've now given the killer a reason to tunnel that survivor into oblivion. On rare occasions, I do see survivors pull off some high IQ plays, where I hit them near the hook and they are able to use the speed burst and blade wipe animation to make distance, drop a safe pallet, and make a hook rescue, and then both slip away before I'm able to catch up. This is very situational, and I'm quick to tip my hat to them when I see this. But what I see far more often is a survivor who is so focused on or panicked about making the hook rescue that mid-chase, well injured, they run straight to the hook with me hot on their heels, essentially giving me a free down on them with a short walk to the hook, and a juicy opportunity to go after the other survivor they just unhooked. Even if they have borrowed time, I can still often get a hit on the other survivor, forcing them to go mend, buying me some extra time before they can hop back on a gen. So no, having borrowed time is not an excuse for making a bad play like this. Be aware of your surroundings, and if the killer is in chase with you, try to lead them away from the hook so that one of your teammates can make the save. Mistake number 3, throwing pallets early. Too often I see survivors run up to a pallet only to throw the thing as quickly as possible, and missing out on a chance to stun me. Sure, if it's a safe pallet, it'll buy them an extra few seconds for me to break it, but a lot of the time I'm able to sidestep unsafe pallets or mind game them around the pallet. Now they've burned one of the most precious resources they have on the map and gained very little or nothing for it. As much as possible, wait until the killer is close to the pallet so that you can stun them, giving you an additional few seconds to make it to the next loop, as the killer must both recover from the stun and break the pallet. You might even be able to make it 1 or 2 more times around a loop before having to drop the pallet, which will buy your team even more time. Now the exception to this rule is the God Pallet in Killer Shack. That thing you want to burn as quickly into the trial as you possibly can. Mistake number 4, leading the killer to POIs, or points of interest. This is very similar to unhooking survivors while in chase. This one can be a little bit tricky at first before you've gained a bit of game knowledge and know what to look out for, but you want to avoid leading the killer to POIs, or points of interest. For the most part, this means not leading the killer towards generators that are being worked on, or teammates who are healing, cleansing a totem, etc. If you run to these locations while being chased, it will force your teammates to stop their work and run or hide themselves. The fewer members of your team that are actively doing stuff means the longer it will take you and your team to finish the generators, which lowers your chances of escape. If I'm chasing someone and they lead me past a generator that is being worked on, I will most likely break the chase to go after the survivor on the generator. So always be on the lookout for generators being actively worked on and try to lead the killer away from them. If you can lead the killer to an area on the map where the generators are already completed, that's even better, because it forces the killer away from unfinished generators, buying your team a little extra time to work on them. In the beginning, I'd also recommend running perks like Bond that will help you see your teammates' auras, so that you have a better idea of where they are and what they are doing, so that you can avoid leading the killer to them. Mistake number 5, setting up a 3-gen. A 3-gen is where there are 3 generators in close proximity to each other, and allows the killer to quickly patrol all of them. It becomes extremely difficult for survivors to be able to complete these gens near the end of a trial, and it's a great strategy for the killer to almost guarantee a win, especially if they've been able to get at least one sacrifice by that point. The counter strategy for survivors then is to do everything in their power to make sure this doesn't happen. The reason why I bring this up as a mistake is that many times, without me even intending to set up a 3-gen, I find survivors will 3-gen themselves, essentially giving me a victory that I didn't earn. It's not unusual for survivors to hop on the first gen they see, and then just move on to the next closest gen, working in a circular pattern. If they don't break this pattern up, there's a decent chance that the last 3 gens will be close to each other and create a 3-gen situation. Try to spread out and or cross to the other gens instead of just chaining gens together. When you finish one gen, don't just go to the very next one you see, but try to go to one on the opposite side of the map. This will split things up enough to reduce the likelihood of a 3-gen at the end. Granted, it's probably more valuable to work on the gen you know about versus wander around for several minutes trying to look for a gen that's not right next to the one you just finished. But as much as possible, try to split up your efforts across the map so that you don't find yourself in a nearly unwinnable position. Mistake number 6, bad pathing. This is something I see all the time. Sometimes you get caught out in the open in a dead zone between pallets and windows, and there's very little you could have done to avoid it. However, I will often see survivors run themselves into corners or run away from me at an angle that allows me to catch up and cut them off much faster. Running to a corner of the map means that I'm able to box you in so that regardless of which way you run, you will have to run closer to me, setting up an easy hit. Avoid these as much as possible and stick to areas of the map that allow you several options to move. The more directions you can go provides you more opportunities to escape or lengthen a chase. The other thing that I mentioned that I see a lot is survivors running away at bad angles. I regularly see survivors waste distance that they could have gained after a pallet stun, or after taking the first hit and getting that brief sprint burst to run away, but they run away at a sharp angle. Rather than having to spend another 20 seconds to catch up to them, by which point they've probably reached another jungle gym or pallet, I can now strafe walk to close the gap much faster. Sometimes this is necessary to run at an angle to reach another loop, but often it just results in me being able to catch up quickly and down them in dead zones between loops. So unless you are running to another obstacle close by that you know you'll be able to reach in time, try to use the time gained by a pallet stun or sprint burst after that first hit to make as much distance as possible, going more or less straight ahead, unless of course that means running into a dead zone. I get that this is very situational, probably the least objective of all the tips I'm covering today, so it may be best to think of this simply in terms of what direction can you run to make the most distance and waste as much of the killer's time as possible. Oftentimes that will be to run directly away from them. Mistake number 7, not looking over your shoulder. The survivor third-person perspective allows for you to pan your camera wherever you want while moving in any direction. Probably my best piece of advice to players just starting out is to learn to pan your camera around constantly, even while running. It can take some practice to look in a different direction from where you are going, and you're probably going to run into a lot of stuff while learning this technique. But being able to watch the killer as you are running will help you anticipate their moves and adapt your strategy on the fly. The other thing to be aware of is that as you pan your camera behind you, your character actually moves their head to look in the direction you are looking. This is important because as the killer, I can immediately tell which survivors are paying attention to me in the chase and which are mostly oblivious to what I am doing. Anytime I see a survivor with their gaze locked straight ahead of them, I know that they're going to be easy to mind game and trick. So even if you are not yet good at panning your camera, even doing it a little bit will at least force the killer to have to think a bit harder to chase you, because they know that you are at least partially aware of what they are doing. But panning your camera is an essential skill to get better at playing Survivor. It's probably one of the best things you can focus on early on to instantly improve at the game. It's literally a game changer. Mistake number 8, not paying attention. Related to the previous one, and something that I see a lot, is survivors not paying attention to what is actually happening around them and then committing to a plan without looking at what the killer is doing. For instance, I'll see a survivor rush to drop an early pallet, loop through a door, and then back around expecting me just to break the pallet and follow them, but instead they run straight into me because I went the opposite way and cut them off. All it would take is for them to slow down, watch for my red stain, and look for clues as to which way I was headed, and then react accordingly. But instead, they just expect me to do one thing and pay the price when I do something else. So make sure as you loop you keep your eye on the killer, especially their red stain, which will give you clues as to where the killer is looking. This will then give you a good idea of where they are likely moving so you can go the opposite way. When you look behind you and don't see the killer, try pausing around the corner so that you're out of direct line of sight, and watch both sides for the red stain. Once you see where the killer is going, you can then go the opposite way. Now, a good killer will moonwalk to throw you off, but often just pausing for a second and looking around you for clues as to what the killer is doing will prevent you from running directly into them because you weren't paying attention. Mistake number 9, blaming the killer. Now, sometimes you get hard face camped by a killer on first hook, and there's very little you could do to change that. But at the end of most trials, there is usually at least something that you could have done better that you can learn from and grow as a player. As a killer main who regularly makes it a point not to camp or tunnel, I'm still often accused of doing so in the endgame chat, even when I clearly was not. Rather than look at their own mistakes and to learn from them, they want to excuse themselves and blame me for why they lost. I mentioned in my latest video on how to deal with toxic survivors that it helps me to learn, grow, and get better at the game when I can admit that I was outplayed rather than complain that the other side wasn't playing quote-unquote fairly. If I act like they were the problem, then I have no motivation to self-reflect and to grow as a player, and I'll end up getting frustrated and losing again the next time I face a similar situation. Instead, I'd recommend always asking yourself, what could I have done differently? And then learn from it for the next time. This is how you will improve. Not every trial will go your way, but as long as you are improving at the game little by little, you still win. So those are the common survivor mistakes that I see a ton of that you're going to want to avoid in order to improve at the game. Are there any survivor mistakes that you see that I left off of this list? Let me know down in the comments below. I do read every single one of them. I enjoy chatting with you all down there, so I try to respond to as many as I possibly can. If you enjoyed the video, would you hit that like button for me? It lets YouTube know to share this out with more people. And if you haven't already subscribed and you would like to do so, if you enjoy my content, could you hit that subscribe button as well? Up next is another couple videos from my channel that I think you would like, so feel free to give those a click and let me know what you think. As always, you've been awesome, stay awesome, and we'll see you in the next episode. Cheers.